So, but Dave, how is Houston doing on this task of attracting new jobs to the Houston area? What's your honest assessment?
What's my feeling about how we're doing attracting new growth, new companies?
Yeah.
I'd say we're not doing well outside of the energy industry. I think there will be some growth in the energy industry in this downturn. Typically what happens, you have consolidations, and the Tulsas, the Midlands, and other areas diminish as oil companies concentrate people here. But in terms of non-energy companies, I don't think we're doing well.
You've been on the board at the partnership in the past. Why do you think this is? Why can't we do a better job in attracting companies? Why aren't
I knew we were going to discuss this. So I was thinking back historically. What was the Chamber of Commerce was challenged in the 1980s as we went through the serious downturn then, and Ken Schnitzer and others, and I was involved in that, said we really need to be focusing on economic development. I don't think that the then Chamber of Commerce or today's Greater Houston Partnership really give the priority to economic development that it needs. The partnership did an important job, for example, lobbying in the legislature to help the city with pension reform. The partnership holds big luncheons. They issue reports. They do studies. They have meetings. But economic development is not their number one priority. People are not hired and fired at the partnership depending on how we do on economic development. And consequently, it doesn't happen. Now, if you look at the supporters of the partnership, they're the major oil companies. And for that, we should be appreciative. The Shells, the Chevrons, the BPs, the Exxons. But do they really care about economic development in Houston? I don't think so. They look to the partnership to help protect their interests, to make the city a better place to live, to be sure that the legislature is friendly to the major oil companies. And that's what matters to them. But whoever's responsible for Chevron or Exxon or one of those companies is not going to have their career made or broken depending on Houston's economic development succeeds or fails. And that's one of the problems, that it's now they're beginning to recognize it because they've gotten a lot of criticism and had a lot of failures in Amazon, Tesla, and so forth. And they're doing their best. But I'm not sure that even the people at the partnership are deal makers. They're generally consultants. They're very good at writing reports, at having meetings, doing studies. And that's what consultants do, but consultants aren't where the rubber meets the road.
You could think, I've heard this idea discussed in the community recent months. It's, we haven't had the results that some people want in terms of getting new companies. But one of the ideas that come up would be that maybe we need a new, more entrepreneurial organization that's not, so tied to, the goals that you mentioned that are prevalent at the Greater Houston Partnership now. Maybe there should be a new group that's more of a deal maker, more entrepreneurial, that has that drive to bring companies, close deals, and say, hey, we just formed a new corporate headquarters. It's going to be 3,000 jobs in Houston. Would a new alternative organization be a good idea?
I don't know the answer to that. I think the partnership is trying to reorient themselves. They've admitted that they've been focused on the downtown and are only now beginning to be familiarizing themselves with the suburbs and the far suburbs. And that's really where the growth in Houston is happening and will happen, in the suburbs and the far suburbs. The partnership has been a very downtown-oriented organization. If you're Bob Harvey, you're concerned with making sure that you have the dues income, and you focus on the people who can write those, whatever it is, $150,000 a year checks, the Chevrons, the Exxons of the world. And you can't blame Bob for that. And I'm sure his board of directors is very concerned with being financially stable. But, for example, let's talk about Tesla. You raised a furor about why weren't we in the Tesla contest. And quite frankly, that got me stirred up.
Good.
And then, so you're the blame, Ralph. And I contacted Bob.
We should have gotten Tesla. Why does
I can give a very strong case. I mean, I don't think Tesla's site in Austin even has rail service.
it doesn't?
Now, Elon,
Factory with no railroad, and you need to bring in all these materials to build the cars, and they got to ship the cars, and you're going to have 5,000 people working there. And what kind of transportation do they have? Texas 130, a 2-lane toll road, no rail, of course, no barges, nothing like that. That's a lot of weight to be putting on.
well, Austin has one interstate, and we have 3.
Yeah.
There's already, Tesla's already shipping 300 cars a week out of the port of Houston. And I bet they're going to export a lot of what they manufacture in Austin. How are they going to get it to the port? Route 71? We have a workforce of 3 million people here in Houston. I don't know where their workforce in Austin is going to come from. Late in the game, I made contact through Bill Ackman with Elon Musk. And he said, and I read his telegram or his email, our problem is a significant other problem. If we're moving people from California, and he was focused on the people he was going to move from California, I don't think he was very focused on the workforce he was going to have in Texas, because hands down, Houston has a much broader and better talented workforce for his type of operation than Austin does.
But you heard the response from Elon Musk, the head of Tesla, about his decision.
He said it was a significant other problem, moving people from California. And I was discussing this with my daughter Carolyn, and she said, "Look, let's say you're a significant other, and your significant other is going to move from California to Texas to work for Tesla. Most people today have 2-income families.
Okay.
And so what type of job opportunities are there? Let's say you're a lawyer and you're married to a Tesla executive, or you're a doctor, or you're a marketing person. How many law opportunities, how many medical opportunities, how many other opportunities are there for that significant other in Austin? They don't exist to the extent they do here. Let's say you're somebody who likes opera or symphony or live theater. Austin doesn't have that. We do. So had we gotten into the fight for Tesla earlier, I think we could have made a hell of a presentation. Unfortunately, the partnership decided that it really wasn't going to go after Tesla because they were told it was sort of a closed invitation type of process. Well, if your compensation depends on getting new companies, you say, to hell with that. We're going to figure out a way to get in the door. If we don't get in the door, if we don't get up to bat, we're never going to win. And I think there would have been a way to get in the door earlier, saying, look, and I've done this before. I did it way back with Gulf Oil when they were going to move their geophysical laboratory to Pittsburgh. You do a Hail Mary. You try to figure out how to get to the CEO, how to get to the executive decision maker and say, look, I know you're thinking of Austin. I know you're thinking of Tulsa. If you hear our case, we can beat them hands down in terms of workforce, logistics, airport, port, land available. Well, the partnership never got to make that presentation because there was nobody at the partnership whose job depended on economic development to the extent that they were going to lose their job if we didn't produce some of these.
That's a shame. That's a shame because you're right. What would we be able to say? You're
now, one of the other problems, one of the reasons.
Shipping, it's horrible.
I'm sorry?
No, but you're right about the Austin site that Tesla did buy and where they are building at a rapid pace, no less. it just doesn't have the logistics. You get on Highway 130 there, you go to 71, you get on 35 to go where? It just doesn't. Why they won, I just don't know. But I understand Elon saying, it depends on what the spouse is, the significant other, what they think, their opinion on things. That's a big deal, and we need to. I guess you'd be better off if you had a better something more. Maybe it's this image, David. Maybe it's this image. Austin, people. Oh, that's a cool place. They have all this live music, whatever. They've got hills. This has a reputation for some reason of being a cool place, and maybe Houston needs to develop that.
Well, there's another factor, and I think that the partnership ran into this when they were trying to get the Toyota truck plant, which went to San Antonio, which is the air pollution controls, the emission levels. And that's something that needs to be rewritten to let Houston have a level playing field. Mm-hmm. Because this is something I've learned something about over the past several months. The way it works, if you have a city that is not currently meeting air level quality standards, you get penalized if you bring in a new manufacturing plant. You have to go out and buy credits. Those credits are generated when a company has done a pollution control project. They get certain credits, and you have to buy those credits from those people. And Bob Harvey told me that would have cost somewhere in the neighborhood of $100 to $200 million for Houston or whoever was coming to Houston to buy these credits to allow a manufacturing plant like that to be built here. Well, that makes no sense. That's penalizing a city that is trying, and Houston has improved its air quality very remarkably, as you know, Ralph, over the last 10, 20, 30 years. If you think back to what air quality was like 20, 30 years ago, it's a heck of a lot better today. You don't get as much odor, you don't get as much air pollution coming off the ship channel. Mm-hmm. And those companies are to be acknowledged and thanked for that. But what happens is if you don't have the credits, you have to go out and buy them. And that puts you behind the eight ball, $100 to $200 million, because I think the partnership has become disheartened going after these large manufacturing facilities. Now, what I would suggest is we get together and get those regulations amended to allow Houston to be able to compete for these. Because what happens instead is when Exxon wants to expand in Baytown and spend $2 billion and build new petrochemical or new refining or whatever facilities they're building there, we know, A, those are going to add somewhat to our air pollution. And you say, how can Exxon do that? Well, it's because they've done projects in other areas and they already own the credits. So they don't want the partnership to be lobbying to change the regulations because the regulations work to their benefit. And that probably impacts, I don't know where Chevron's doing an expansion, Port Arthur, Shell probably in Deer Park. They don't want those regulations changed because they've gotten them worked around to where they can live with them. So Bob's a little bit hogtied. He doesn't want to change the regulations because his major supporters like them the way they are. But as long as they're that way, we can't go after the Toyotas and the Teslas.
Isn't that amazing? You can build a $6 billion chemical plant, but you can't build an electric car factory that's got a 4 million square foot roof covered with solar panels. That doesn't seem like, when you're on the green scale, I think a net zero factory with all that solar would be a lesser blow in terms of Clean Air Act than Exxon building another expansion to their Baytown facility.
Yeah, it touches on a very tender subject, which is what is the future of Houston? Is the future of Houston with these wonderful energy companies we have today, but who may be shrinking over the next 10 to 20 years, as evidenced by Exxon being removed from the Dow Jones Industrials? Should we really be two cities where we have all of our industry to the east and all of our white collar, high tech, clean industries to the west in a way that's already happened, in a way that's been happening in Houston for the last 100 years. You know, the Houston Country Club used to be over on the east side of Houston. Why did it move to Tanglewood? Because the heavy industry was on the ship channel in that area over there, and they didn't want to have their country club there. And yet it's very close to us. I was in a high rise in River Oaks the other night, and you look out and you can see the lights on the ship channel from River Oaks. It's, you know, most people don't realize the turning basin is closer to downtown Houston than Memorial Park is.
Wow. Unreal.
And so we've got to walk this line. We love these oil companies. They create terrific jobs, high-paying jobs. Some of them are trying to like BP, and I think Shell are trying to transform themselves to address renewable energy and what's happening. Can they do it? I think the jury is out. They've been trying. I remember ARCO trying this 20, 30 years ago. I remember BP having the slogan Beyond Petroleum, which has disappeared. Mm-hmm. Can they do it? I don't know. We need these oil companies. We need their people. We need these jobs. But the future of Houston is going to be with if you look at the stock market, where the values of the stock market are, they're Apple, Microsoft, Intel, those companies. And I think that's where the future of our country and of the world is largely going.
So you need to bring up what happened. You know, that's kind of the big deal. A little commercial, hey, from this book. We talk a little bit, my book, Houston 2020, which there's a chapter in there about the energy corridor. And we interviewed David about that and used a lot of his insights in that. I guess David I think the chapter is called The Genius of Marketing. He came up with this energy corridor on one level as a slogan, which was tremendous. They're energy companies in the Middle East. Hey, they know where the energy corridor is. That's in their vocabulary. Everywhere, this name and the respect for the energy corridor being this place is location for hundreds of energy companies and companies that are related to energy companies that do business with energy companies. It's a tremendous place. And David grew up here at the Park 10 business park there, and a number of others attracted a lot of companies. But now, and the energy core is a great name. It's stuck. It's Katy Freeway, kind of near Highway 6 on either side. But that name is so great. But we're thinking about the future, what you brought up. What's the future? So what happens next to the energy corridor? I think it's like 30 million square feet of office space, everything. So what happens in the future? What happens to the energy corridor? What's next?
Well, I think we have to look at what's happening in the energy corridor today. You continue to have major energy companies moving out there. Marathon's building a 1 million square foot tower. You have McDermott leasing a 500,000 square foot building. Conoco, of course, moved across the freeway and took 1 million square feet, leaving their campus behind. Schlumberger has expanded there, Air Liquide. So you still have major energy companies moving into the energy corridor. You also have non-energy companies there, such as Gulf States Toyota, Cisco Foods. A lot of the engineering companies do energy engineering and engineering for all sorts of other projects. What we see happening in the energy corridor, which I define now as being, say, from Memorial City to Barker Cypress, which is where the Texas Medical Center West Campus is located, it's really becoming the downtown of West Houston. By that, I mean it's more than just office space, more than just employment. It's probably the largest concentration of healthcare facilities in the metropolitan area outside of the Texas Medical Center. There are 5 hospitals on I-10. You have 2 Memorial Hermann hospitals. You have Texas Children's, and Texas Children's feels that that'll be sort of the center of Houston, where they are at I-10 and Barker Cypress. You talk to Mark Wallace about what they see. Methodist has a major hospital there, and we just worked with MD Anderson for a $210 million facility in Central Park, which is our 80 acres in the center of the energy corridor. Wow. You have retail, of course, what Metro National is doing to recast Memorial City from a retail point of view, what Midway has done in City Center. Another part of retail that's often ignored is the automobile business. Mack Hike's dealerships in the energy corridor do 10,000 vehicles a year.
Sure.
And so you've got the major Mercedes, Lexus, Cadillac dealerships there serving that population. So the energy corridor is not just energy, not just office, and not just those types of employment base, which are very important, but it's retail, it's healthcare. And what we're also beginning to see in the energy corridor now is high-rise residential starting in Memorial City. We're aware of another high-rise residential project that's underway in the energy corridor.
Yeah, right. At Bunker Hill, I think is where there's a big building there at the corner of Bunker Hill and the Katy Freeway.
And this is in addition to that. So it's becoming more of a downtown. What we see is the continuing growth of West Houston for all the reasons why West Houston has grown so much over the last 20, 30 years. West Houston is now a community of more than 1 million people. It's defined to say starting at Memorial City, going to the Brazos River, starting on the south at the West Park corridor, going up to the 290 corridor. And it's there because it's a great place to live. People can buy houses for $200,000, $300,000, $500,000 in a master plan community, easy commute to their jobs, great school districts, green space, good freeways, I-10, Grand Parkway, 290. And as that growth continues, the downtown of West Houston, which is the energy corridor, will continue to grow. Now, I was thinking really, of course, there's an oversupply of office space now in the energy corridor. There's a lot of demand, but all the developers in Houston in the early teens decided they wanted to build 1 million to 1.5 million square feet in the energy corridor. And I think in the early teens, it may have been the #1 office construction market in the entire United States. There's not much was going on in New York, not much was being built in San Francisco. I think perhaps more office space was created in the energy corridor during that period. So typically Houston style, we overshot our skis. You created a lot of great office space out there, and most of the good space is being filled. Some of the others is struggling.
Yeah. I remember seeing that at one time when you're talking about like 2013, 2012, maybe, that the occupancy rate for office buildings in the energy corridor was like 99%. 99% is unbelievable. That high, you got to build something. Slam dunk.
But what happened was, Metro National built, Midway built, Pro built, Mack Hike, Lincoln, Skanska, Transwestern. They all came in with big, typical Houston, came in with big, beautiful projects. And most of them are filled now, but it's sort of emptied out the older buildings, some of which are now 40 or 50 years old. To a degree, this is what's happening in Manhattan, where the buildings over on the east side, Park Avenue, Lexington, are now about 40 or 50 years old, and Hudson Yards built over on the west side. And a lot of the consulting firms, law firms, investment banking firms wanted the higher ceilings, the better HVAC systems, the bells and whistles of the amenities that weren't available in the 50-year-old buildings.
It's and you hear about this especially in New York, but in other places too. Companies saying, "I don't know if we want to be in these very, very dense urban areas." And it's part of the fallout from the pandemic. And who wants their workers to don't want to be getting on a subway and packing in to get to downtown? So there's this urban suburbanization. I guess companies, people want to go to the suburbs. I may be able to work at home day or two a week or maybe all the time. So I need to get a bigger house. I can get it cheaper in this way out suburbs where I don't need to live near downtown anymore. I can go out and buy a suburban home with a home office, good schools for my kids, and backyard and all that stuff that comes. So, and I keep hearing there's builders, subdivision developers that are doing residential projects are making tracks through the burbs. And home builders are having a great year. How do you see the pandemic impacting the marketplace?
Well, I think it probably just accelerated trends that were already underway. I think, uh, I feel that in a metropolitan area, you want a strong downtown just as you want strong suburbs. You don't want a metropolitan area that's hollowed out. So I applaud what Central Houston and the people who are committed to downtown have accomplished, making it more of a 24-hour area. But the number of people moving into downtown is less than you will see moving into a single subdivision, whether it's Cinco Ranch or Bridgelands or any of those. It sort of got a more play than I think it deserved to get. It was sort of a man bites dog story because people over many decades have been concerned about the downtowns dying. And I'm happy that we have a healthy downtown, and I encourage
It can't be a Detroit donut city with nothing in the middle. It's got to be
exactly.
Got to have a strong core.
But the major growth is in the suburbs. That's why the hospitals moved out to I-10, because that's where the customers, particularly the paying customers, are. Houston has always been a story of school districts, municipal utility districts, and freeways. And that story continues to play out in West Houston. I-10 got rebuilt to where it's now, I think, the largest freeway in the country, 24 lanes or something like that. It should have had light rail alongside of it, but that's another story about which I feel strongly.
Yeah, we had that right away there with the existing rail line. It could have been a great commuter rail thing, and I don't know. The leadership at the time was, a wider freeway would be better. That was one of the big mistakes I think that the leaders of Houston made in the last 30, 40 years. It was a big one. It was a big, hate to see it.
But I think what you see is these great school districts out there, which sort of have been, when we first went out into the I-10 area and we were in the Katy School District had 2 elementary schools, 1 junior high school, and 1 senior high school. Today they have, I know Cy-Fair has something like 8 to 10 senior high schools. Katy probably more than that. And now you're seeing that growth going into the Waller Independent School District, the Fort Bend Independent School District. And Houston's growth is often a story of, well, you and I remember when Spring Branch was the prized school district.
Yeah.
And if you lived in Spring, that's what drove a lot of the growth of Memorial, Spring Branch Independent School District. Well, now you've got Katy and Cy-Fair as the prize districts, and Waller and Fort Bend is coming on very strongly. One of the things we tend to underestimate, just as we don't appreciate the leadership of our hospitals and healthcare systems in Houston enough, is the leadership of our school districts. Some of these school superintendents are really great people, and they're thinking ahead. Waller just passed a $295 million bond issue. They want to have a first-class school district there because they know how important it is to the community. When I think about the medical center, and I think about people like Mark Wallace, Mark Boom, the late Ralph Feigen, Denton Cooley, Michael DeBakey, we owe such a debt of gratitude to those people building our medical center. I tell people, MD Anderson has been formed since World War II. Think about that, a world-class hospital that didn't exist before World War II. I grew up in Philadelphia where the hospitals go back to the 1700s. And they're great hospitals, but we've done it here in Houston during our lifetime.
I know. That's amazing. Amazing place, 100,000 jobs, people working there, all those 21 hospitals, 3 medical schools, and 6 nursing programs. It's a pretty big place, pretty phenomenal. And I hate to digress from that, but not too, a couple of years ago, maybe 3 years ago, not far from the medical center, there's a lot of discussion, and there's actually a land purchase by the University of Texas, about 250 acres, I think it was, just south of 610, near Highway 90, Buffalo Speedway, not far from the Astrodome, and not far at all from the medical center, a couple of miles. And University of Texas wanted to build a major data center. Just all these had a lot of potential in terms of bringing a lot of talent, a lot of tech talent, a lot of jobs, and they're talking about building 1 million feet. And this would have been a great thing for the city. And if it had gone through, if they had construction had begun back then, it would be really nice right now to have those kind of jobs coming online. It would be a great thing. But
Well, I haven't given up on that.
What? You haven't?
I haven't. The first 5 years I was in business, I had a project in New Orleans. I don't know if you've ever done business in New Orleans, but it's not easy. Business is about 7th on their list of priorities after eating, drinking, carnival, fishing, hunting. I dealt with my leading real estate brokers in New Orleans, never worked an afternoon in his life. So, you go to the Boston Club for lunch and then play dominoes all afternoon. To do the deals I did in New Orleans, I had to make them 2 or 3 times. I'd make them and then they'd say, well, we're going to defer it for a year. I'd have to go back. I was working with Philco Ford, make it a second time. So I was trained to operate in that type of difficult environment. One thing I've said to Bob Harvey in terms of economic development is that nothing succeeds like success. One of the reasons that Plano continues to get companies is because they've gotten companies before. So they get the attention, they have the credibility. And so we've had some real estate oriented meetings with the partnership, which they call, because I think they're reaching out. They're trying to figure out what to do. And they said, what can we do? And I said, well, I don't think the University of Texas deal is necessarily dead. Really? I've talked to people concerned with the university. They still own all the land. They still want to be in Houston. This is the largest city in the state. They're in Dallas. Obviously, they're in Austin. They're in Dallas. They're in San Antonio. They're all over. And they don't have an academic. They do have MD Anderson, right, but they don't have an academic institution presence in Houston. And they know they should. And they want to be here. They just need the signs from the Houston community, particularly the business leadership, saying we want you. Now, one of the problems before was the relationship between Chancellor McRaven and Governor Abbott. They did not get along. Well, unfortunately, Chancellor McRaven is no longer the chancellor, but for the purpose of this deal, that may be good. Right. Maybe the governor has gotten a little humility dealing with the pandemic crisis and seeing how tough that is. So what needs to happen is that the Greater Houston Partnership, which can pull together the business leadership of the city, has to pull together and not have meetings. I mean, get something done instead of meetings and studies and reports. And I've talked to the mayor. He's on board with doing this Institute of Data Science, which is even more so relevant today. I mean, for example, think of all the data that's being generated in this COVID epidemic. Many hospitals many healthcare centers, not only in the United States, but all over the world. Somebody's got to pull that information together and say, what have we learned in terms of prevention, in terms of vaccines, in terms of side effects, long-term side effects?
It's probably double. The data is probably doubled every week or something,
Exactly. Right. So the idea of managing data is still valid. Maybe instead of focusing only on energy, it focuses on energy and healthcare. How much data is being generated just in the Texas Medical Center, and who's coordinating it? What's being generated at Methodist, what at Memorial Hermann, what at St. Luke's? Is anybody coordinating it? I doubt it. So the idea of an Institute of Data Science is still very valid. And the partnership has to pull together the business leadership to go to the governor and say, I know you didn't like the idea, but we really like it, Governor. We really want it. You have to have some good Republicans, some good avid supporters in the room. And he might say, well, okay, I just didn't like it the way the chancellor was doing it, but if you want it, we'll make it happen. Obviously, we have to get the University of Houston inside the tent rather than outside the tent. I've talked to various people who know that should happen. I think Tillman knew it should have happened. And I think Renew, after Tillman came out and saying, yes, this can happen, Renew said, no. There was a fear on the part of the University of Houston, which I don't think was justified. But I think they should be inside the Institute for Data Science rather than worrying about it as being something that will hurt them. Because we all know that when you have a metropolitan area with great academic institutions, it makes all the difference. I lived in Boston for 2 years in the 60s. That was a dying city. It had lost all its major industries, textile, shoes, fishing. We're all gone. Boston today is booming for one reason, because the academic institutions and healthcare institutions that are in Boston. Boston is red hot. And you're getting major corporations moving from Europe, moving their world headquarters to Boston because of this brain power. We need that here, and we need the University of Houston to act. Stanford doesn't say to UC Berkeley, get out of my market. Harvard doesn't say to MIT, you shouldn't be in Boston. They feed off each other. And this will help the University of Houston move to its next level, to have the University of Texas here interacting with that. So I said to Bob Harvey, this is something we should do now. They own the land. They want to be here. They just never got the encouragement from the Houston business community. They never had, somebody's got to deal with John Whitmire. Somebody's got to deal with Governor Abbott. Somebody's got to deal with the U of H. And I've talked to people like Welcome Wilson. I think Welcome sees that U of H can benefit by being involved. And this is where the partnership can play a role. Bringing people in the city together for the common good. But it can't be just meetings. It can't be just reports. It's got to be action.
David, you've got some fantastic ideas, and you've done a lot for the community and in a lot of ways. And I know that's why you got the 2020 Distinguished Citizen Award from the Rotary Club. And I know that's quite an honor, and they don't just, you've done a lot of things in many arenas, for the civic arena and philanthropy, things of that nature, for this area and for the community. So congratulations on getting that award again. That was quite a deal. And I really appreciate you taking time with me to do this Ralph Bivens Project podcast. And we hope that some of these ideas keep moving. Reviving the University of Texas property would be one thing. Maybe trying to get something more entrepreneurial happening in the partnership that actually is focused on growth. And those would be two major things that you've enlightened us on today. And I think you also broke good news in saying that Elon Musk, the reason Houston couldn't get on the radar, his radar screen, which is a very important radar screen. Elon Musk wants more. There needs to be more jobs, more opportunities, more things of that nature for significant others and spouses and families, and for his redevelopment projects and for his development projects and bringing people from Silicon Valley. So I think people may be ready to leave Silicon Valley, so we may have hope for the future. Okay, but thank you very much, David, and we will we'll be watching to see what happens next.
Thank you, Rob. Appreciate it.
Take care, man.